What if everything you've been taught about Jesus is built on a beautiful, heartfelt, but fundamental misunderstanding, one that could change how you see faith, prayer, and your own spiritual awakening from this moment forward? From the first pages of traditional Christianity, many of us were taught that Jesus was God incarnate, a singular exception to human nature. But what if Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, whose readings have sparked intense debate for decades, was right in saying Jesus was a human soul who reached divine consciousness through many lifetimes of growth? Has this ever happened to you? You hold a belief your whole life, then encounter a piece of truth that makes your heart race, your mind reel, and your spirit quietly whisper, "There's more here." But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Cayce's claim doesn't diminish Jesus. It reframes him as the ultimate model of human potential, proof that Christ consciousness is not a pedestal beyond our reach, but a path beneath our feet. Imagine hearing that Jesus did not arrive as a cosmic exception, but became the purest expression of divine love by choosing alignment with higher law over and over again. What you're about to discover might surprise you. If Jesus attained this state through soul evolution, then the door to divine consciousness stands open for us too, not reserved for saints or sages, not locked behind ritual or institution, but accessible through the inner work of love, forgiveness, service, and surrender. Stay with me until the end, because this introduction sets the stage for a journey that can transform how you pray, how you heal, and how you understand your purpose. We're going to gently step beyond the old boundary lines and ask, what if the Christ is not a last name, but a living frequency that anyone can tune to? What if Jesus' greatness lies not in his distance from us, but in his closeness, his complete mastery of the same human trials we face: doubt, temptation, fear, and the aching need to belong? In this light, the message of Edgar Cayce isn't heresy. It's an invitation to a deeper spiritual truth, one where the divine spark in you is not metaphor, but destiny. Has this ever happened to you? You hear something that clashes with doctrine, yet it feels strangely like coming home. You sense that spiritual truth is more expansive than the walls we built around it. Cayce's readings point there, to a universe where traditional Christianity meets a mystical current, where Jesus becomes our elder brother, the way shower, guiding us toward the same union with the source he realized. In that frame, Jesus, not God incarnate, doesn't erase reverence. It multiplies it, because it tells us the Master's life was not a performance we could only watch, but a map we can actually follow. What you're about to discover might surprise you. This perspective suggests your struggles are not signs you're disqualified. They're the very materials of transformation. Every moment of compassion, every choice for love over fear, moves you toward the living pattern Jesus embodied. And if Christ consciousness is a universal presence, then your most ordinary day becomes sacred ground, a place where prayer becomes practice, belief becomes becoming, and the soul remembers what it came here to do. Stay with me until the end. We're about to trace how this reframing unseats spiritual hierarchy, awakens direct communion, and recasts salvation as awakening from within. We'll explore why seeing Jesus as exemplar rather than exception could be the missing key in your own journey. How the language of divine consciousness, multiple lifetimes, and soul evolution doesn't negate faith, but deepens it, inviting you into a more intimate relationship with the Source. And in the very next part, we'll step into the heart of Cayce's most controversial insight and ask, if Jesus attained it, what does that say about what you are truly capable of becoming? If you're drawn to reflections like these and want to keep exploring insights that expand your perspective and deepen your spiritual journey, make sure to subscribe to the channel. This way, you won't miss the next revelations we uncover together, and you'll always have a place to return to whenever you're seeking clarity, inspiration, or transformation. Think about what this really means. If Jesus is not positioned as an unreachable exception, but as proof of what a human soul can become, then the entire framework of spirituality shifts before our eyes. The story stops being about distance and begins to be about possibility. It's no longer a tale of one miraculous figure appearing in history to do what no one else could ever do. Instead, it becomes a revelation of what every person is capable of when they align fully with love, truth, and the higher laws that govern the universe. This is more than theology. It's a mindset shift, a hidden truth that changes how we approach our struggles, our choices, and the direction of our lives. When Edgar Cayce described Jesus not as a divine anomaly, but as the culmination of a journey through many lifetimes, the impact was profound. It suggested that spiritual growth is not only possible, but expected, that transformation is not reserved for a chosen few, but is the destiny of all who seek. Behind the scenes of traditional doctrine lies this powerful insight: worship may inspire reverence, but imitation transforms the soul. The value of Jesus' life was not to remind us of our smallness, but to demonstrate the magnitude of what lies dormant within us. Consider the ripple effect of that idea. If Jesus' path was one of decisions, moment-by-moment choices to align with divine consciousness, then every decision you make also carries weight. Every time you choose compassion instead of resentment, forgiveness instead of bitterness, truth instead of convenience, you are walking the same road. The difference is not in kind but in degree, and that degree narrows with each act of conscious alignment. This makes the journey intensely personal, rooted not in dogma but in lived experience. For centuries, people have carried the burden of feeling spiritually inadequate, convinced they could never measure up to the perfection of the Nazarene. But Cayce's revelations flip that narrative. They tell us the very point is not to admire Jesus from afar, but to recognize ourselves in him. He becomes a mirror reflecting back our divine potential, showing us what can emerge when the inner spark is nurtured. The implication is staggering. Christ consciousness is not a treasure locked in heaven, but a frequency available here and now, waiting to be recognized within your own being. This understanding doesn't strip away the sacred, it amplifies it. The sacred becomes not only what we worship in another, but what we cultivate in ourselves. Jesus becomes less of a mystery to be adored, and more of a model to be embodied. And if that is true, then the great question is no longer, was he God in the flesh? But how do we awaken the same presence within us? That question leads to a transformation of mindset, where spirituality is not about external belief, but about internal awakening. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because Cayce's insights open doors that challenge the very way we think about identity and purpose. If the path to divine union is open to all, then the barriers we've believed in, separation, unworthiness, limitation, start to crumble. Life itself becomes the training ground, and every struggle turns into an invitation to grow. What once felt like punishment can be reframed as preparation. What once looked like random suffering becomes a carefully designed classroom for the soul. This isn't abstract philosophy. It's a practical key for living. Imagine carrying the awareness that your daily frustrations, your heartbreaks, your failures, are not signs of distance from God but stepping stones toward alignment with the source. Imagine realizing that the same light that illuminated Jesus shines within you, awaiting recognition. That shift changes not just how you pray, but how you breathe, how you treat others, how you face yourself in the quiet of the night. If this resonates with you, write in the comments, "I'm also on this path." Say it as a declaration, because putting it into words affirms the truth you've always carried inside, that the path is not exclusive, and that you too are walking it. When we begin to look at Jesus through this lens, something remarkable happens. The distance we've always felt between ourselves and the divine starts to shrink, and what once seemed unreachable suddenly becomes a living possibility. This reframing doesn't take anything away from the sacredness of Jesus. In fact, it magnifies it, because his life no longer stands as an isolated miracle, but as a demonstration of what lies dormant within every human soul. It's as though a hidden truth, long buried behind centuries of doctrine, begins to surface. The same light that illuminated him is quietly glowing in each of us, waiting to be awakened. Seeing Jesus as a blueprint instead of an exception transforms spirituality from a matter of passive belief into a journey of conscious practice. It invites us to step behind the scenes of the traditional story and ask deeper questions. If the essence of divinity is not locked away in one person but spread across humanity, then what choices, what decisions, what daily acts of love and forgiveness are required to bring that spark into full flame? It's no longer about admiring greatness from afar. It's about recognizing that the very path walked by the Nazarene is one we too are capable of walking, step by step, through our own transformation. This perspective carries an immense impact on how we view our struggles. For centuries, the mindset has been shaped by the belief that Jesus belonged to a category of being fundamentally different from us. But Cayce shattered that divide by emphasizing that the gap is not of kind, but of degree. Think about what that means. The very substance of your soul is made of the same divine material. The difference lies not in origin, but in the level of consciousness expressed. And consciousness, unlike fixed status, can grow, evolve, and expand. This opens up a new way of seeing life itself. The journey isn't about waiting for salvation to arrive from outside, but recognizing the divine potential already flowing within. Challenges, losses, and obstacles stop looking like punishments and start revealing themselves as catalysts, each one carrying the possibility of growth. This hidden truth changes the narrative of suffering. Instead of being evidence of our separation from God, difficulties become the raw material through which we can polish our inner light. The impact of this realization is profound. It shifts our entire mindset from victimhood to empowerment. When we take Jesus as a model, we begin to see that his mastery was not about escaping humanity, but about embracing it fully and transforming it. He felt the weight of temptation, the pull of fear, the sting of betrayal, yet he consistently chose alignment with divine principles. Behind the scenes of every story we've been told lies a deeper pattern. Jesus wasn't demonstrating impossibility. He was revealing what steadfast devotion, inner discipline, and unwavering love can accomplish. If the distance between us and him is only a matter of degree, then every choice we make either narrows or widens that gap. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because it leads us to the striking conclusion that the divine spark within is not a poetic metaphor, but an actual force. Imagine what happens when you stop seeing that spark as a distant ideal and start treating it as the most authentic part of who you are. Each act of kindness, each moment of clarity, each decision for compassion becomes evidence that you are aligning with the same universal energy that Jesus embodied. The journey ceases to be about worship and begins to be about awakening to the realization that what seemed reserved for one extraordinary life is in truth the destiny of every soul willing to step into it. If this perspective resonates with you, write in the comments, "This makes sense to me." Putting it into words affirms the recognition that this light isn't theoretical. It's something you've already felt in moments of love, forgiveness, or deep clarity. By sharing it, you're not just agreeing, you're declaring that you, too, recognize the spark within. If God's presence is not something limited to a single channel, but a universal reality within every soul, then the entire stage of spirituality looks different. The sacred stops being a distant figure and becomes a living force already woven into the fabric of who you are. Behind the scenes of centuries of tradition, a hidden truth begins to emerge. Divinity is not waiting to be reached from the outside. It is waiting to be recognized from within. This understanding redefines everything we thought we knew about salvation, faith, and what it means to walk a spiritual path. Instead of believing we are forever dependent on an external savior, the message becomes one of active responsibility. Transformation is no longer about hoping to be rescued, but about choosing, day after day, to align with higher principles. Salvation becomes less about receiving and more about becoming. That subtle shift is revolutionary. It calls us out of passivity and into awareness, reminding us that the greatest revelations are not locked away in sacred texts, but unfolding in our mindset, in the decisions we make when faced with struggle, and in the way we respond to the ordinary moments of life. Think about the impact of this perspective. If Jesus, stands as a mirror reflecting our highest potential, then every glance at his story is actually a glance into ourselves. His teachings stop being distant ideals and become practical demonstrations of what is possible when a soul consistently chooses love over fear. This reframing dismantles the idea that divine love was a once-in-history exception. It shows us that divine love is a choice available here, now, in every encounter, in every decision, in every hidden place where forgiveness could replace judgment or compassion, could silence anger. The journey, then, becomes intensely personal. You're no longer looking outside for confirmation of worthiness. You're cultivating it inside. That's the transformation Cayce's message invites us to embrace. The responsibility might feel heavier at first because it removes the comfort of passivity, but in truth it is liberating. It places the power of awakening directly in your hands. Every challenge becomes a classroom, every decision a chance to step closer to that state of consciousness Jesus embodied. The path is not abstract, it is lived moment by moment, decision by decision. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, because when we view Jesus as the mirror of our potential, it also reshapes how we see failure and limitation. Through this lens, mistakes are not evidence of disqualification, but opportunities for refinement. The same divine spark that illuminated Jesus is still burning in you even when you stumble. What matters is not perfection, but persistence, the willingness to return again and again to alignment with love. Imagine the freedom of knowing that setbacks are not the end of your journey, but part of the very process that strengthens it. That's where transformation takes root, not in avoiding difficulty, but in learning how to meet it with a new consciousness. This mindset reveals the deeper impact of Cayce's vision. Jesus is not separate from us in kind, but only in degree. The hidden truth is that the same universal reality of God's presence exists in all of us, waiting to be expressed. That means every act of kindness, every decision for compassion, every moment of truthfulness is more than personal virtue. It is the unveiling of the divine within. It is a revelation in action, the behind-the-scenes reality of what spirituality looks like when it is lived instead of merely believed. If this way of seeing resonates with you, write in the comments, "I see the mirror," because saying it out loud is more than agreement. It's an acknowledgement that you've recognized something in yourself, reflected through the life of Jesus, and that recognition is already part of your awakening journey. What truly makes this perspective powerful is the realization that mastery is not the absence of struggle, but the way we meet it. Jesus did not walk above temptation or glide past hardship as if they were illusions. He faced them fully, the same way we do, but his decisions were consistently rooted in alignment with higher laws. Every trial became an opportunity to choose love instead of fear, truth instead of denial, compassion instead of judgment. That is where his strength resided, not in being spared from the weight of humanity, but in carrying it with unshakable devotion to divine principles. It reveals a hidden truth. What defines spiritual greatness is not immunity to difficulty, but the courage to respond differently to it. This understanding transforms how we approach our own lives. If his mastery came through decisions made in the heart of human struggle, then our struggles are not proof of our distance from God, but the very ground on which transformation takes place. Each conflict, disappointment, or moment of weakness is a classroom, and within it, the chance to imitate not by ritual, but by choice. To imitate Jesus in this sense is not about external gestures of reverence, but about the internal decision to live forgiveness when bitterness feels easier, to extend service when selfishness tempts us, to choose love when indifference would be more comfortable. That kind of imitation has a direct impact on our lives and the lives we touch. It makes spirituality alive, present, and deeply personal. The distinction between worshiping a God incarnate and following a man who united himself with God reshapes faith at its core. Faith is no longer about gazing upward in distant awe, but about looking inward and realizing that divinity is a presence you can participate in. This doesn't reduce reverence, it expands it. Instead of one shining example locked away in history, we see a pathway, a map, a mirror of what humanity is capable of becoming. Faith shifts from something you proclaim to something you embody, from passive belief to active transformation. It becomes about trust, not just in a figure from the past, but in the potential within yourself, a trust that the same divine laws Jesus aligned with are waiting to be discovered in your own choices. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because this distinction also changes how we understand responsibility. If Jesus' life demonstrates what happens when a soul consistently chooses alignment with divine will, then every one of our choices carries a weight we often overlook. Behind the scenes of our daily routines, each moment of honesty, compassion, or service is not small. It is the building block of consciousness. Just as he demonstrated on a grand scale, we too are shaping the state of our souls in ordinary moments. And when we begin to see our decisions in that light, the meaning of faith is no longer abstract. It becomes a lived reality that transforms how we think, how we act, and ultimately, who we become. If this perspective opens something in you, write in the comments, "I choose alignment." Let it be more than words on a screen. Let it be a declaration that even in the midst of daily challenges, you recognize the power in each decision to reflect the same divine laws that guided Jesus toward his mastery. The moment Edgar Cayce's revelations began circulating, they shook the foundations of belief systems that had stood unchallenged for centuries. For some, his words felt like a direct assault, as if they were unraveling the sacred fabric of Christianity itself. To hear that Jesus was not God incarnate, but a soul who had walked the same evolutionary journey as the rest of humanity, sounded like heresy of the highest order. It clashed with long-protected doctrines, and for many, it was simply too destabilizing to accept. But for others, the very same insight came as liberation. It was as if a heavy curtain had been pulled back, revealing a hidden truth that had always been there. Faith could be more expansive, more personal, and less bound by rigid dogma. The impact was undeniable, forcing people to confront the deepest assumptions they carried about divinity, salvation, and human purpose. This divide reveals something profound about the human mindset. Beliefs become more than ideas. They intertwine with identity, shaping how people see themselves and the world. When a new perspective challenges those beliefs, it often feels like a threat, not just to doctrine, but to personal stability. Yet, behind the scenes of this tension lies an opportunity for transformation. Those who felt freed by Cayce's revelations discovered a pathway that shifted spirituality from external authority to inner discovery. Jesus was no longer a figure placed so far beyond reach that he could only be worshipped. Instead, he became the clearest teacher of divine love the world has ever known, a living demonstration of what alignment with the source could look like in human form. Cayce's framing did not reduce Jesus's greatness. It reframed it. If anything, it magnified the significance of his life by making it relevant to everyone. He was not distant, untouchable, or reserved for a higher category of existence. He was a soul who fully embodied divine love, showing in practical terms what it means to respond to betrayal with forgiveness, to meet suffering with compassion, to surrender completely to a will greater than the ego's desires. His story becomes less about exceptionality and more about possibility. That shift carries an enormous impact on how faith is lived. Instead of being centered on doctrines that must be accepted without question, faith becomes a living practice, a series of conscious decisions that bring us closer to embodying the same principles he demonstrated. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because the controversy itself holds valuable lessons about the nature of truth and transformation. The tension between those who rejected Cayce's insights and those who embraced them shows us that revelations often unsettle before they enlighten. They shake the ground, forcing us to see where we stand and what we are willing to question. Every great transformation in history has carried that dual effect: disturbance on one side, awakening on the other. The same dynamic is alive in our personal journey. When a new idea enters our lives, especially one that challenges how we've always defined ourselves, the initial response may be resistance. But if we stay with it, if we allow ourselves to explore without fear, what once felt like a threat often becomes the key to growth. Seeing Jesus not as an untouchable deity, but as the purest embodiment of divine love, shifts the relationship from worship to imitation. His greatness does not reside in being unlike us, but in showing what is possible within us. The hidden truth is that divinity is not about separation, but about realization, and this is where faith transforms into practice, where every choice becomes a reflection of whether we are aligning with fear or with love. That is the behind-the-scenes impact of Cayce's vision. It reframes the life of Jesus into a universal template for transformation, one that invites us to step into our own spiritual authority with humility and courage. If this perspective resonates with you, write in the comments, "I recognize the teacher," because naming it out loud is more than agreement. It is a way of affirming that you too see Jesus not as distant, but as a living model of divine love guiding your own journey. When we look at the life of Jesus through Cayce's perspective, one of the most striking revelations is that his greatness was not built on exemption from the human condition, but on how he responded to it. He knew betrayal, he knew loss, he knew the sting of rejection, and the temptation to fall into anger or fear. Yet, instead of reacting from ego, he chose responses aligned with divine law. Every challenge that could have dragged him into bitterness became instead a doorway into deeper love. This shift in mindset is profound because it tells us that holiness is not about never facing darkness, but about how we choose to meet it when it appears. If his attainment of Christ consciousness was the result of steady growth, then our own struggles take on a completely new meaning. The moments that feel like obstacles, failures, or painful detours may in fact be essential steps in our journey toward awakening. The hidden truth here is that evolution is not a straight line, and spiritual transformation rarely comes without tension. Behind the scenes of every hardship lies a possibility to respond with greater awareness, to choose compassion over retaliation, to use suffering not as proof of separation, but as fuel for connection. This reframing dissolves the old fear that difficulties are punishments handed down from above. Instead, suffering becomes a teacher, guiding the soul into maturity. Each moment of pain carries within it the seed of growth, if we are willing to meet it with openness rather than resistance. Jesus' life demonstrates this principle vividly. His trials did not define him as broken, but revealed his capacity to embody divine love under pressure. In this light, our own challenges lose their sense of cruelty and take on a new dignity. They are opportunities to polish the soul, to stretch beyond the limitations of ego, to awaken a deeper capacity for love. Think about the impact of this shift. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" we begin to ask, "What is this teaching me?" That single change of perspective transforms victimhood into empowerment. Suddenly, the storms of life stop being meaningless disruptions and become invitations to evolve. This doesn't make suffering easy, but it does give it purpose. It aligns with the idea that spiritual development is forged in the fire of experience, that each moment of choice carries weight, and that nothing is wasted on the path of awakening. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because this understanding challenges the way we've been conditioned to view pain and limitation. For so long, we've been told that divine favor looks like protection from hardship. Yet, what if the opposite is true? What if the presence of trials is not a sign of abandonment, but of preparation? This perspective reshapes the entire journey of faith. It tells us that growth is not accidental but intentional, that the very struggles we wish to escape may be the ones sculpting us into the people we are meant to become. Behind the scenes of every human life, there is a quiet story of resilience unfolding. Jesus embodied that resilience at the highest level, showing that the path to divine union is paved not with avoidance, but with endurance, not with comfort, but with courage. If his story teaches anything, it is that transformation is possible even in the darkest moments, especially in them, and that realization places an extraordinary responsibility in our hands. How we respond to suffering determines whether it becomes a weight that crushes us or a stepping stone that elevates us. If this way of seeing resonates with you, write in the comments, "Growth through struggle," because putting those words down is more than agreement. It is an acknowledgement that you recognize your own challenges as part of a greater journey, one where each trial carries the hidden potential for awakening. When we allow ourselves to see Jesus not as someone untouched by human weakness, but as a soul who endured real temptations and real doubts, something extraordinary happens. His story becomes alive. Instead of feeling distant, he feels near. Instead of appearing flawless in a way we could never reach, he becomes relatable. His victories inspire because they were not guaranteed. They were born from decisions, daily, moment by moment, where fear could have taken root, where resentment could have spoken louder, where despair could have won. Yet he chose differently. This is what Cayce wanted us to notice, that Jesus' greatness came not from being above the human experience, but from transcending it through unwavering devotion to love. This reframes the story entirely. It is no longer about a divine being effortlessly walking through life with privileges we do not have. It is about a human who constantly leaned into the divine presence, no matter the circumstances. Every doubt he faced, every temptation he resisted, every act of forgiveness in the face of betrayal added another step toward full union with the Source. That narrative is not about distance, it is about process, and process is something we all understand, because every one of us knows what it feels like to choose love when fear is knocking at the door, or to forgive when resentment feels easier. It may not be easy, but it is real, and that reality is what makes his journey so inspiring. In this framework, faith stops being passive admiration and becomes active imitation. The hidden truth is that worship alone does not transform us, but following his path does. His life was not meant to stand as a monument of what we could never be, but as a map for what we could become. This is where spirituality takes on a practical dimension. It moves beyond ritual and enters the territory of mindset, decisions, and transformation. The call is not simply to believe in him, but to walk with him, not physically, but in consciousness, by choosing the same alignment with love that he consistently chose. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because the implications reach far beyond religious tradition. If the essence of Jesus' story is about consistent alignment with divine love, then the meaning of faith itself changes. Faith is not about waiting for rescue. It is about acting in harmony with higher truth, even when everything in us wants to collapse into ego's demands. It is about holding to the conviction that every moment of fear can be met with compassion, every spark of anger with forgiveness, every shadow with light. Behind the scenes of the story we thought we knew lies a far more radical invitation to live as he lived, not in perfection overnight, but in dedication to the process of becoming. This perspective also changes how we view spirituality as a whole. No longer is it confined to sacred spaces or Sunday rituals. It is carried into the ordinary. Every conversation becomes an altar, every decision an offering, every act of kindness a prayer. That is the impact of shifting from worship to imitation. Suddenly life itself becomes the spiritual practice. And when we embrace that, the distance between ourselves and the divine collapses, because the path to union is no longer hidden. It is woven into the fabric of daily existence. If this resonates with you, write in the comments, "Walking the Path," because writing it is more than just agreement. It is a way of affirming that spirituality for you is not about distant admiration, but about embodying, step by step, the same love that turned a human life into a living expression of the divine. The idea that the same divine spark which illuminated Jesus also lies dormant within. Every soul reshapes everything we thought we knew about spirituality. It means that divinity is not a quality bestowed on a chosen few, but a universal presence, quietly waiting to be awakened. This hidden truth has immense impact. It takes the mystery of holiness out of the unreachable and places it into the heart of every human being. Suddenly, the spiritual journey is not about admiring the light from afar, but about recognizing the flame already flickering within ourselves, ready to be nurtured into brilliance. What Cayce revealed is that this awakening is not instant. Spiritual growth unfolds gradually, often across lifetimes, shaped by countless decisions, struggles, and revelations. We like to think of transformation as dramatic and immediate, but in truth it is more often subtle and cumulative. Every moment of patience in the face of frustration, every decision to forgive when resentment feels easier, Every act of compassion that costs us something is fuel for that inner flame. Over time, these choices accumulate, refining the soul, raising consciousness, and expanding awareness. It is a process, not a performance. And that process dignifies every small act of love, because each one becomes part of the architecture of awakening. This perspective changes how we understand imperfection. Mistakes, setbacks, even our darker impulses are not proof that we are disqualified from divine potential. They are part of the curriculum of growth. Jesus himself, according to Cayce, did not arrive at divine consciousness through privilege, but through discipline and devotion, forged over many incarnations. He was not handed perfection. He earned it through perseverance, through choices made again and again to align with higher laws. If even he required that journey, then our own struggles are not failures, but evidence that we too are in the midst of the same universal process. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because this hidden truth invites us to rethink what it means to live with purpose. If spiritual mastery is not about exemption but about effort, then each decision we make is charged with meaning. Behind the scenes of ordinary life, we are shaping the trajectory of our soul. The way we treat strangers, the way we handle disappointment, the way we speak when no one is listening, all of it matters. It matters because it either feeds the flame of the divine spark or smothers it under layers of fear, ego, and illusion. Every act of alignment becomes a quiet declaration. I am choosing to evolve. I am choosing to awaken. This understanding also brings humility. If the path to divine consciousness required lifetimes even for Jesus, then we can approach our own growth with patience. We don't have to demand instant transformation or flawless perfection. The journey is long, but every step counts. And perhaps the most profound shift comes when we realize that what made Jesus universal was not his difference from humanity, but his demonstration of what humanity is capable of becoming. His story was never meant to be untouchable. It was meant to be imitated. He lived as proof that the same energy running through creation can find full expression in a human being. If this perspective resonates with you, write in the comments, "The spark is within me." Putting those words down is more than just acknowledgement. It's an affirmation that you see your life not as random or ordinary, but as part of a greater journey of awakening, where every choice carries the potential to reveal the divine already alive inside you. When Cayce drew the line between Jesus, the man, and Christ, the cosmic force, he revealed a perspective that changes the very foundation of faith. Jesus, the historical figure, was a soul who walked through the same struggles and limitations as any other human being. Christ, however, is something vaster, an eternal energy, a universal consciousness that permeates all creation. To see this clearly is to recognize that Christ is not confined to one moment in history, but is present everywhere at all times, waiting for souls to attune themselves to it. This hidden truth carries immense impact because it dismantles the idea that divinity is exclusive to one figure and replaces it with the revelation that Christ is an eternal frequency accessible to all who choose alignment. Understanding Christ as a title for union with God, rather than a surname, pulls back the curtain on centuries of misunderstanding. The word becomes less about identity and more about realization. Jesus earned this title through his perfect alignment with divine will, but Cayce's insight insists that the potential is not limited to him. Any soul that undergoes the transformation of consciousness, that surrenders ego for love and illusion for truth, steps into the same union. This reframes the spiritual journey not as distant admiration, but as intimate participation. The mindset shift is subtle, but revolutionary. Salvation is not about attaching ourselves to someone else's perfection, but about cultivating our own. This opens a new dimension of what authentic Christianity truly means. Instead of being defined by doctrines, rituals, or blind acceptance of tradition, it becomes about awakening Christ consciousness within. It's not about memorizing creeds or reciting prayers without awareness. It's about living in such a way that divine love takes root in thought, word, and action. Behind the scenes of ordinary life, every moment becomes a chance to embody what Jesus embodied. The hidden truth is that faith, in its most authentic form, is not belief alone but transformation, an inner unfolding that leads us from separation into union. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because recognizing Christ as an energy, rather than a fixed identity, radically alters how we engage with spirituality. It means that divinity is not locked in the past or in ancient texts, but flows through every heartbeat, every sunrise, every act of genuine compassion. It suggests that the same force that animated Jesus is animating you now, waiting for recognition. And that recognition does not come through passive belief, but through conscious decisions, the way you respond to suffering, the way you treat others, the way you handle your own inner battles. These choices are not small, they are the very process of awakening Christ consciousness. This perspective also strips away the notion of hierarchy. If Christ is universal energy, then no institution, no priest, no external authority can monopolize access to it. The journey is profoundly personal, unfolding within the hidden corners of the heart, in the quiet places where intention meets action. It empowers the seeker to stop waiting for permission, and instead step into the awareness that the path has always been open. Jesus showed what it looks like to walk that path to its fullness, but the footsteps are meant to be followed, not worshipped from afar. When you let this insight settle, it changes how you see yourself. You are not a distant spectator of holiness, but a participant in it. You are not merely hoping for divine favor, you are capable of embodying it. Authentic Christianity, then, is not about exclusion, but inclusion, not about elevating one figure above all others, but about recognizing the spark of Christ consciousness waiting in every soul. It's about transformation, mindset, and the courage to live differently in the small, ordinary decisions that shape the soul's journey. If this perspective resonates with you, write in the comments, "Christ lives within," because putting it into words is more than agreement. It is an affirmation that you recognize divinity not as something far away, but as a living presence ready to awaken inside you. If the Christ energy is truly a universal frequency of divine love, then spirituality takes on a dimension far more expansive than most of us were ever taught. Think of it like a signal that is always broadcasting, invisible yet constant, waiting for souls to tune their inner receivers to it. This is not poetry. It is a practical metaphor for what happens when we shift our mindset, align our choices, and begin to live in harmony with love. Suddenly, what once felt distant and abstract becomes immediate and personal. The hidden truth here is that divinity is not a rare occurrence. It is the ground of existence itself, waiting to be recognized. The impact of this perspective cannot be overstated, because it dismantles the notion that Christ consciousness is locked behind layers of authority or reserved for those deemed worthy by institutions. If divine love is a frequency that anyone can access, then no intermediary stands between you and God. The journey becomes direct, and that realization is both liberating and humbling. Behind the scenes of centuries of religious hierarchy, this insight strikes at the very core. The sacred is already within you. Access to the source is not purchased with rituals or controlled by dogma. It is awakened through decisions, through transformation, through choosing to live differently in each moment. This is where Jesus' life becomes more than history. It becomes revelation. By fully embodying divine love, he became a living channel, not to demonstrate his difference from us, but to show us what alignment looks like in human form. His words, his actions, even his silence in the face of suffering, reveal what happens when the ego dissolves and the soul aligns with that frequency of love. That is why Cayce's reading reframes him not as a figure to worship from afar, but as a demonstration of possibility. The impact of this is enormous. It tells us that the same path is available, that the same love can flow through us, that we too can become living channels of divine consciousness. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because the idea of becoming a channel for divine love challenges the way we view our daily lives. Too often we imagine spirituality as something reserved for sacred spaces, holy texts, or moments of prayer. But if Christ energy is always present, then the journey is not about escaping the ordinary, it's about transforming it. The way you speak to your family, the patience you show in stress, the compassion you extend to strangers, all become expressions of that frequency. Spiritual practice is not hidden away in temples. It is woven into the fabric of every choice, every word, every action. This is where faith meets reality, where belief transforms into embodiment. Seeing Jesus through this lens removes the illusion that divine love is unreachable. It was never meant to remain an untouchable mystery, but to be lived and expressed. The mindset shift here is subtle yet revolutionary. Instead of trying to acquire holiness, we realize it is already here, waiting to be revealed. What stands in the way is not absence, but misalignment, our fear, our ego, our refusal to listen to the quiet guidance already speaking within us. The invitation, then, is not to look outward, but to tune inward, to find the signal that has always been there, and allow it to reshape how we live. If this reflection stirs something in you, write in the comments, "I choose to tune in," because affirming it is not just acknowledgement. It is a way of declaring that you are willing to align with that frequency of love, to let it move through your life, and to walk the same path of transformation that Jesus demonstrated as a living channel of the divine. When Cayce revealed that Jesus was not born in a state of flawless perfection, but instead evolved spiritually across many incarnations, he opened a doorway into a truth both humbling and empowering. The image shifts from an untouchable figure who arrived already complete to a soul that walked through the same trials of growth, discipline, and perseverance that mark every human journey. This hidden truth has profound impact, because it places the story of Jesus within the same framework that shapes our own lives. His mastery was not a gift delivered at birth, but a state of consciousness cultivated across lifetimes of decisions, challenges, and transformation. The idea that even Jesus' soul faced mistakes, that he too had to recognize error and realign with higher principles, strips away the illusion of spiritual privilege. Instead, it paints a picture of progress that is gradual, cumulative, and deeply human. Each misstep became a stepping stone, each failure a lesson, each victory a deeper alignment with divine truth. This behind-the-scenes revelation dismantles the idea that perfection is instant or automatic. It reminds us that mastery is not about avoiding mistakes, but about learning from them with courage and persistence. In that light, every error becomes part of the journey rather than evidence of disqualification. What makes this perspective so compelling is how it redefines our relationship with Jesus. He ceases to be an untouchable deity placed forever above us, and becomes instead an elder brother, one who has walked further along the same road we are on, showing by example what is possible. This shift transforms worship into companionship. The narrative is no longer, "Look at what he achieved that you cannot," but "See what he became, and know you can walk the same path." That reframing changes faith from distant admiration to intimate imitation. It invites us to step into our own process with patience, persistence, and hope, knowing that progress, not instant perfection, is the essence of spiritual evolution. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because the idea of Jesus as an elder brother, rather than a cosmic exception, changes how we interpret our struggles. If the soul that achieved Christ consciousness had to wrestle with failure and shadow before attaining mastery, then our challenges are not signs of weakness, but invitations to growth. Behind the scenes of every trial lies the possibility of transformation. What matters is not that we fall, but how we rise, not that we stumble, but how we realign. This mindset removes the burden of shame from imperfection and replaces it with a recognition of process. The impact of this realization is profound. We begin to see ourselves not as broken beings hoping for rescue, but as souls in the process of unfolding, moving steadily toward the same divine union that Jesus achieved. This hidden truth also reframes time itself. If spiritual evolution spans lifetimes, then urgency gives way to patience, and the weight of mistakes softens under the light of perseverance. The journey is long, but it is not hopeless. Each lifetime, each lesson, each moment of choice adds to the soul's growth. And if Jesus himself needed that time, then we too can honor the slow but steady work of becoming. Transformation is not about racing toward an impossible standard, but about walking faithfully in the direction of love, truth, and divine alignment. If this reflection resonates with you, write in the comments, "I walk with my elder brother." Because writing it is more than agreement, it is a way of affirming that you see your struggles as part of the same path Jesus once walked, a shared journey where every step, even the difficult ones, carries you closer to awakening. When we begin to see every challenge as a classroom for the soul, the entire landscape of life changes. Struggles that once felt like punishment or random cruelty are suddenly reframed as opportunities designed to shape and refine us. This hidden truth transforms how we carry our burdens. Instead of asking why misfortune has struck, we can ask what the moment is trying to teach. Each setback becomes a teacher, each loss a lesson, each disappointment a tool for transformation. It's a mindset shift that dissolves despair and replaces it with a deeper sense of purpose. The impact is profound. Life stops being a series of meaningless hardships and becomes an intricate journey of evolution, where even pain has a role in awakening the divine spark within us. Cayce expanded this idea of transformation by reimagining one of the most established cornerstones of Christian doctrine, the Trinity. Instead of seeing it as three distinct divine persons bound together in theological mystery, he described it as a symbolic map of universal principles. The Father represents the source, the eternal wellspring of creation from which everything emerges. The Son embodies the ideal pattern of consciousness, perfectly expressed in human form, showing us the potential of what we can become when aligned with truth and love. The Spirit is the active presence, the living energy that flows through every moment, guiding, sustaining, and inspiring us if we are willing to listen. This redefinition pulls the Trinity out of abstraction and turns it into a living experience. No longer is it a puzzle to be accepted blindly. It becomes a framework that speaks directly to our inner lives. The Father is felt in the awe of creation, in the grandeur of a night sky, or the delicate symmetry of a flower. The Son is recognized in the choices we make to embody compassion, forgiveness, and service. The Spirit is encountered in moments of intuition, synchronicity, and inspiration that remind us we are never alone. Through this lens, the Trinity is not a doctrine imposed from outside, but a pattern to be discovered within. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Cayce's interpretation doesn't just expand our understanding of theology, it shifts the very location of spiritual authority. For centuries, institutions positioned themselves as gatekeepers of the divine, claiming exclusive power to interpret and mediate humanity's relationship with God. But if the Trinity is symbolic of realities already present within each of us, then the true authority is not external, it is internal. This doesn't mean dismissing community or tradition, but it does mean that ultimate communion with the divine cannot be outsourced. It is not handed down by institutions, it is awakened within the individual soul. This hidden truth has enormous impact because it invites us to trust our own experience of the sacred. It means the divine presence is not confined to rituals or reserved for clergy. It is alive in the very fabric of your consciousness. Authority shifts from external validation to inner recognition. The Spirit becomes not a distant concept but the living energy guiding you in real time. Faith stops being about compliance with rules and begins to look like alignment with love, integrity, and compassion as they unfold in your actual life. This behind-the-scenes revelation removes fear from the equation, because access to God is no longer contingent on belonging to the right system. It is as close as your next breath, your next act of kindness, your next moment of awareness. If this way of seeing resonates with you, write in the comments, "The classroom is within," because affirming it reminds you and shows others that every moment of life, even the difficult ones, carries the potential to awaken deeper understanding and connect you directly with the source, the pattern, and the presence that have always been guiding your journey. When we recognize that the sacredness of Jesus did not come from a cosmic privilege handed down to him, but from his full realization of humanity's divine potential, something within us begins to shift. His life stops being a story of inaccessibility and becomes instead a revelation of what it means to live authentically aligned with the source. This perspective removes the weight of impossibility from the narrative. It tells us that Jesus was not chosen to stand apart from us forever, but that he chose, again and again, to embody the divine presence within him, and in doing so, he showed us what we are capable of when we walk the same inner path of transformation. This hidden truth reframes sacredness itself. If holiness is not about being spared from human struggle, but about making decisions in harmony with divine principles, then every person carries the same potential. The impact of this is extraordinary. It means that each of us, regardless of background or circumstance, can step into the same frequency of awareness that Jesus embodied. The journey is not about imitating his external life, but about awakening the internal reality he demonstrated, a reality where love overcomes fear, compassion transcends judgment, and unity dissolves separation. When we embrace this understanding, faith becomes less about worship and more about practice. Jesus becomes not an untouchable deity, but a living blueprint of human possibility. He stands as proof that the divine spark within us can be nurtured into full flame, that our ordinary lives can become extraordinary when lived with devotion, discipline, and love. This behind-the-scenes revelation shatters the idea of exception and replaces it with example, and that example carries a quiet but powerful invitation. If he could do it, so can we. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, because this shift in perspective does more than reframe theology. It transforms our mindset about ourselves. When you stop seeing divinity as something external and start recognizing it as something already present within, your relationship with life changes. Challenges stop feeling like walls and start becoming doorways. Failures stop being final verdicts and become lessons. Every decision, no matter how small, begins to feel significant, because each one either pulls you closer to alignment or further from it. The hidden truth is that Christ consciousness is not about reaching for something far away. It is about uncovering what is already here, beneath the layers of fear, doubt, and illusion. The impact of this realization is not just personal, it is collective. Imagine the transformation of a world where people no longer see themselves as powerless, waiting for salvation from outside, but as participants in the same process of awakening that Jesus embodied. It would mean that compassion is no longer optional, but natural. Service is no longer extraordinary, but expected. Forgiveness is no longer weakness, but strength. Behind the scenes of human history, every great movement of transformation has been born from this same spark, when individuals dared to see themselves as more than limited beings and began to live as channels of divine love. Jesus wasn't an exception, he was an example. And that example is both humbling and empowering. It humbles us because it reminds us that sacredness is not about status, but about surrender, not about being chosen, but about choosing. It empowers us because it affirms that the path is open to all, not reserved for a select few. The journey toward Christ consciousness is not locked away in distant heavens, but woven into the fabric of human life, waiting to be walked by anyone willing to take the steps. If these words stir something within you, write in the comments, "The path is open." Because putting it into words is more than agreement. It's a declaration that you see the road not as blocked by impossibility, but as a living invitation, calling you to awaken to the same divine potential that Jesus revealed through his own life. If you've stayed with me all the way here, I hope this journey has sparked something meaningful in you. These reflections are shared each week to bring clarity, inspiration, and a sense of deeper connection to those questions we all carry inside. So if you feel this content adds value to your path, I'd love for you to subscribe. That way you'll always have a space to return to when you're seeking perspective and insight. And since you've walked with me until the very end, let me know in the comments by writing, "I'm with you until the end." It's always powerful to see how many of us are on this journey together. If this conversation resonated with you, a simple like on the video is another way of affirming the connection we've built here. There's a video right here that beautifully complements everything we've explored today. Click and continue with me over there, and let's keep unfolding this path together.